David Moyes and probably more importantly, West Ham have got trouble ahead in January. The more I think about it, the more I think that we are unprepared for what January is about to throw at us. Let me just quantify what I mean. We're going to lose a load of players to the African Cup of Nations. The people that are coming in as their replacements are not ready. And also, we're going to have a load of players that are going to want to leave because they've just not been involved. That's what I mean by cultivate. So when these players go, and there's not loads of them going to the African Cup of Nations, by the way, but we are going to need their replacements to step up. But I'll tell you who is going. Nayef Aguerd and Mohammed Kudus. Now, I'm going to use those two as examples, but I want to talk about a lot more players. And I'm talking about the players who are going to feel disgruntled, who are going to want to leave, and they're going to leave in January. So, for instance, let's say Mohammed Kudus is going to leave. What would David Moyes do in such a situation? Well, he's probably going to pack the midfield. He might play Thomas Souček there. But what if he wants another wide player? What about if he wants to do that? Then, well, Benrahma's not going to be an option. Now, irrespective of how good or bad you think Benrahma's been this season, I don't think he's been particularly good. He would be the option to play wide. He's not going to be there. David Moyes has also not actually cultivated much of a working relationship with Maxwel Cornet. In fact, I think he's going to be hung out to dry. I think it's going to be a massive case of Nikola Vlasic-Tritus with him because we're going to just lose money on the player. But he'll be going away because Ivory Coast are the hosts of the African Cup of Nations, so he'll be gone as well. If David Moyes needs someone to play left wing, I'll tell you who's going to play on left wing, and that'll be Pablo Fornals. And this is not going to be a good situation for West Ham. I mentioned it in the previous video, and myself and Gio were doing the tier lists. Pablo Fornals is a husk of a player that he was. Certainly not effective enough to play for us for a month's worth of football in any sort of effective way at all. So what's David Moyes going to do? Is he just going to rinse the same players over and over and over? He's going to need people to be able to step in. And I've got to say, if I was Pablo Fornals, I wouldn't want to step in. In fact, I would want to leave. Fornals' contract's up at the end of the season. I would want to leave now in January. And I don't think he'll be the only one. I don't just want to focus on him either. Let's use Nayef Aguerd. Nayef Aguerd is the first choice left centre-back. I think it's really hard to make a case that Angelo Ogbonna is going to step in for a month because that's what you're dealing with. Probably a little bit longer with the African Cup of Nations. Something like it starts quite early January. They're going to need a little pre-season. They're not going to be able to fly out the day before the first game. There's going to be a pre-tournament camp, isn't there? If they reach the final, then it takes you to certainly the second week in February. Again, you're going to need to travel back at least a month. For some, it may well be more like 5 weeks. You can't ask Angelo Ogbonna to play all of those games. You really can't. So who are you going to ask to step in? I don't think you can particularly rely on Kurt Zouma for obvious reasons because he's injury prone. I'll tell you what it'll be. It'll be step forward Thilo Kehrer. It's a massive ask for someone like that because he's not been involved at all. When Thilo Kehrer joined us, he came from Paris Saint-Germain. He was a German international. Now, I don't pretend to know the situation with the German international team. I guess we'll find out an awful lot more this week with the international stuff. I don't even know if he's been selected for Germany. Really couldn't tell you. But if he hasn't, I wouldn't blame Germany for not selecting him. My point being, Thilo Kehrer is going to want to leave, and I don't think he'll want to wait until the end of the season. I think he'll want to leave in January. And if David Moyes is somehow telling him, "Oh, don't worry, when it gets to January, I'll use you more," I just wouldn't be interested. I'd be saying, "Look, I want to leave," and I don't think he'd be the only one because I think we've got a problem at fullback as well. Not because of the African Cup of Nations, but I've got to say, if I was Aaron Cresswell at the moment, I'd be pretty peeved that I didn't get to get me transfer that I wanted. Be pretty peeved about the testimonial situation, and then I think I'd be a little bit disgruntled that I'd been displaced by Emerson. Emerson deserves to be first choice left back. I'm not saying anything other than that, by the way, but I just think if I put myself in Aaron Cresswell's situation, I'd want to leave. I wouldn't want to wait until the end of the season. I wouldn't want to leave in January. Now, I'm going to make a case for quite a few of these players wanting to leave in January, by the way. This is where it gets to cultivation. This is where it gets to preparation. Where is Moyes' preparation for this? Ollie Scholes has not featured because you think about that, OK, we're going to need a backup left-back. Who's that going to be? Well, it can't really be Ben Johnson, can it? I mean, because for the same reasons that I've just given for a lot of the players, if I were Ben Johnson, I would want to leave in January. We're not prepared to give him the deal that he wants. He's not featured. He's stagnating at West Ham. He had a trajectory that was like that, and it's now dipping and going down the other side. He is on a downward spiral at West Ham. He needs to leave. We know Sean Dyche wants him. We know there are other managers that actually covet this player and think he's a really, really good player. And let's not forget, Johnson was in the under-21s team that picked up the trophy in the summer. He was part of that squad, and he played. It wasn't like he didn't feature at all. He was part of that squad. And I just think, with that in mind, there will be other clubs who would want to buy him, who would play him because they would value him. My point is, I think it was very, very hard for David Moyes to go back to the well on these players and say, well, actually, now the other guys have gone, I probably need you now. What's he going to do? Just play Soufal and play Emerson all throughout the whole of January and no one has a break all through January and the start of February? It's totally and utterly reliant on nobody getting injured. And this is where I do feel he's completely missed a trick by not promoting some of these young players. And, like the old song goes there, maybe trouble ahead. I think it's happening, and I really do. And it worries me a little bit. Let's go with Maxwel Cornet just for a second here. Maxwel Cornet is a problem because we're just going to lose £17 million on him. I'm quite convinced of that. And the trouble is with him there is that he's going to the African Cup of Nations. We can't offload him to generate some funds in January. Nobody's going to buy Cornet in January. Why would you buy a player? Anyone that wants to buy him is going to want it, probably going to be in a precarious situation. Maybe you're Bournemouth or someone like that. Bad example, I know. But the type of team who might just be teetering, the signing of Maxwel Cornet might just stop you getting relegated. Well, if you're in that position, you're not going to sign him because he's not going to be available until mid-February. It's in many respects a pointless signing. And it's just going to be a player that has just not featured. Basically, I think a lot of these players have been left to rot under the current managerial situation. And I think you probably can do that, but if what you're not doing is preparing the replacements in the form of the under-21s coming through, then I think you've done a very, very silly thing indeed. And I've mentioned the under-21s on numerous occasions. I've spoken about that EFL trophy. It's been brilliant. They've played against men's teams, 3 men's teams, and they've beaten them all. They've only conceded 1 goal. Beat Bristol Rovers 4-1, the men's team. And the Bristol Rovers fans were saying, that the West Ham under-21s would walk it in League One. That's what they were saying. You heard a similar thing from the Cheltenham fans. We beat Cheltenham 4-0. We beat Newport County 1-0. As well. Top to the group, into the knockout stages. I don't know how long that's allowed to continue. I remember I think in the first point in that competition, I don't think the under-21 teams were allowed to progress, but West Ham have progressed. And I'm not, look, I'll say this now, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that West Ham, I'm not saying they will, but are good enough to go really far in that competition. That's how good our under-21s are. There's no reason whatsoever that some of them shouldn't have been prepped. And I don't just mean with Barmer getting on the bench every now and again. I mean, have a little bit of foresight. You get a right back ready, you get a left back ready, centre back, one of the midfielders. You get the idea, because what we're going to be left with is he's going to try for a month and pack the midfield. And that midfield that we pretty much don't like, which is Alvarez, Souček and Ward-Prowse in there, which doesn't really have that much creativity. That's what you're going to have. That's how he's going to cover the fact that he doesn't have. He's going to have to lose Mohammed Kudus. It's going to be a real issue for us. And I just wonder with him if he just hasn't. It puts so much pressure on the recruitment strategy. And we're slow at this stuff, right? Okay, maybe Tim Steidten's in now and maybe things are a little bit faster and maybe things are a little bit better. But traditionally, we have been quite slow. Realistically, we need people in January, and we did them in the first week. And I would argue the case that actually we need a winger, we need a striker, and we probably need a fullback. Now, I read a lot of your comments. A lot of you were sticking up for Soufal in the comments of the video the other day. Look, I just want to make it clear, I'm not slagging off Vladimir Soufal at all. And I said a lot of good things about him, about his leadership, about his grit, about his determination, how he gives so much, particularly when I don't feel we have a real proper captain at the moment. I think Soufal gives a lot. I was not slagging Soufal off. The entirety of my point was that I think when we're attacking and we're trying to do those other things, I think we could do with a player with a little bit more technique. I think he's the now. I don't think he's the future. And I'd like to see a situation certainly next season where Soufal is having heavy pressure on his position in the same way that Emerson put heavy pressure on Cresswell's position. But so I think in terms of us bringing in fullbacks, I think fine, don't promote people from the youth team if you're David Moyes, but it puts pressure on the recruitment strategy and the recruitment team to bring people in. and bring them in early in January. I don't know. Look, maybe I'm completely wrong here, but I just see it's like there's an iceberg ahead of us, and David Moyes is steering the Titanic directly towards it. And if there is preparation for January, all I'm saying is I've not seen it.